Coming up, relaxed COVID regulations, narco planes, good hair, and a heartwarming story of a rescue at sea.
You're listening to Brent's 2 Cents, the semi-serious thoughts of a guy in Belize. And now here's the host of this podcast from somewhere in Belize City, Brent Toombs.
Hey, welcome to the podcast for the week of February the 1st. Well, there's a lot to unpack from last week, so I'm going to break from my usual format of having one main topic and instead offer my 2 cents on a few issues that Belizeans have been talking about. Starting with COVID-19, or more specifically, the latest statutory instrument detailing the latest adjustments to the virus containment restrictions. The big change that most people were hoping would happen was a relaxation of curfew hours. The curfew now begins at 10 p.m. nightly, giving us an extra 2 hours of freedom before locking down for the night. The main rationale for this is, of course, economic, in particular, to help restaurants. And that's something I agree with, as I mentioned in last week's podcast. Food vendors can now also return to public spaces, something else that I agree with. Now, my concern with the 10 p.m. curfew is that I know it will encourage social gatherings. Those extra 2 hours will make the difference between someone going straight home after work or stopping to meet friends for a couple of chicken wings and several buckets of beer, or 2-for-1 cocktails. And if I'm starting to sound like a broken record about these so-called restaurants that operate as bars, good. That's intentional. Because I'm concerned about the lack of enforcement in that area. I have yet to hear of one of these businesses getting charged because they let customers drink alcohol for hours after finishing a meal. And of course, there will be more public drinking now that you can stay out until 10 p.m. Those extra 2 hours will be the difference between going home to watch Netflix or meeting your crew by the seaside or in the park with your icebox and your quartz and your plastic cups. This sort of behavior was on full display all over prior to the 8 p.m. curfew imposed in mid-December. And I have no doubt we will see more of the same now that people have been trusted yet again to stay out a bit later. Gyms can open now, but only for 50% of capacity, and by appointment only. Patrons must be logged in and have their temperatures checked, and the gym operators are responsible to make sure that all equipment is sanitized after each person uses it. Now, I think this is one area that health officials need to monitor closely and be vigilant about contact tracing in order to really get an indication if gyms are as dangerous as some people fear or as low risk as gym owners and exercise junkies claim them to be. One thing I know for sure, we will once again be debating whether or not gyms should be opened and allowed to operate sooner rather than later. So let's at least use this experiment to collect some useful data. Churches had their prayers answered, well, mostly. Places of worship can now open for 50% of their capacity, although services are not supposed to last longer than an hour. Now, of all the relaxations and reopenings, this one has me the most concerned. First, 50% capacity is still a lot of people in one of those evangelical megachurches. And many of those believers tend to skew towards denying COVID-19 altogether. The SI does not address ventilation for churches, so while restaurants can only open if they are open air, a church could have an enclosed and air-conditioned space. There is no restriction on singing, which is a huge spreader of vapor from one person to another, nor is there any requirement for people to remain physically distanced from each other while inside the church. And may I remind you that it was an evangelical mega church in San Pedro that was identified as one of the clusters that started the spike of infections in August that led to the complete lockdown on Ambergris Key. But it seems that GOB wants to throw the churches a bone to keep them happy at this time. And I'm sure it's only a coincidence that government is trying to garner support for the legalization of weed, and municipal elections are just a month away. So in the meantime, please say your prayers that I'm wrong about churches being the next super spreaders in Belize. And speaking of drugs, another narco plane crash landed in northern Belize district in the wee hours of last Friday morning. But what makes this story different is that for once, the police were actually able to respond in time before the drugs and people vanished. Well, at least the local people who may have been helping to facilitate the landing. 9 Belizeans were found near the crash site in a boat with about 70 kilos of suspected cocaine in their possession. 2 of those suspects are police officers, while a third suspect is a member of the Belize Defense Force and the driver for the commandant, Brigadier General Stephen Ortega. Another 23 bales of suspected cocaine weighing in at over 680 kilos was recovered at the crash site. So, a pretty good day for Belize in the war on drugs, right? No, not likely. Already the Commissioner of Police has told reporters that it's unlikely the suspects detained on Friday will be charged for facilitating the drug plane, that the bulk of the suspected cocaine will be tagged as found property, and at best those 9 Belizeans might get charged with possession with the intent to traffic. But you and I know they'll never get convicted. Not in Belize. Notice I said suspected cocaine? That's because we've seen cocaine turn into flour when it's found in the possession of special people in the past. Or the coke gets lost, or some stupid handling or chain of custody error gets made and the evidence is thrown out. And time after time after time, police and soldiers and drivers of big men and friends of politicians have their charges dropped or get acquitted, while senior police just shrug their shoulders and promise to catch the bad guys next time. So, how many times have we seen this movie before? And why should we expect a different ending this time around? Remember the drug plane that landed on the Southern Highway 10 years ago, resulting in the arrest of 7 police officers and a customs officer, including the driver for the Governor General? All charges got dropped. Or the guy who crashed a Lincoln Navigator he was driving at the Belize border after running from Mexican customs officers in December of 2017. 6 kilos of cocaine was found hidden in compartments inside that vehicle. The driver somehow managed to flee the secured area and was not detained until 2 weeks later. When he finally went to court in June of 2019, prosecutors just dropped the charges. Or what about 12 Guatemalans and a Belizean arrested on weapons and drug charges in 2018 after over 1,000 pounds of cocaine was discovered in an SUV on the coastal road? The entire case was dropped after 2 of the Guatemalans took the rap for the weapons. They were fined $100,000, which was paid immediately, and the 12 were ordered to leave the country. No one even bothered to ask how they had access to $100,000 or who might have paid the fine on their behalf. Or how about the cop found with aviation fuel at the scene of a suspected drug plane landing in Barranco in December 2018? He was detained, but never charged. Remember the 8 people who got caught red-handed with a huge cargo of drugs and weapons and actually got into a shootout with police in September of 2019? Charges against 7 of them were dropped in December last year, while only the pilot remains in custody, and he's yet to even answer the charge against him. You know, I can't think of one high-profile narco-trafficking bust in the last 20 years when anyone has actually been convicted and jailed. But hey, the police and the director of public prosecutions will keep trying to catch and punish the bad guys, right? Okay, another hot button issue this past week was hair. Natural hair, to be specific. Now, as a Caucasian male with straight and thinning hair, I'm about as far from an expert on this issue as one can get. But I have learned a lot over the years from my female friends of color that hair is a very big deal. It's not just fashion, it's politics, it's culture, it's identity, it's self-image. And it can also be used as a weapon against the wearer of a particular hairstyle. Hair can be a means of oppression, of subjugation, of racism. Last week, Cheyenne Banner, an employee of the Belmopan City Council, was told by her supervisor that she needed to do something about her naturally styled afro because it was, quote, offensive. Banner refused, and when the story hit social media, a movement was born. Facebook was flooded with scores of photos from Belizean women proudly rocking their natural hair, including the acting Chief Justice of Belize, Michelle Arana, and Senator Isabel Bennett. Meanwhile, others who were born with what some in society still call good hair expressed solidarity and support for their curly-haired sisters. Now, this is not the first time in recent years that natural hair has created a buzz in Belize, but it was so encouraging to see that the discussion this time around was mostly about embracing and supporting the right to keep your hair how you want, rather than debating about what is or isn't appropriate for work or school. It seems every September, well, at least back in the days when kids went to school, that there'd be a controversy over how some boy or girl wore their hair. And many people would speak out in favor of those institutions that were suspending the offending student because they believe that young people need to learn discipline and how to follow orders. Well, hopefully after the viral response from last week, those people will now realize that draconian rules about how to cut or style your hair is discrimination. Discrimination that is rooted in racism. The same people, like the supervisor who tried to tell Ms. Banner that her hair was offensive, are products of the Belize education system that continues to reinforce this colonial mentality that the kinky hair of Afro-Belizeans is bad and that the straight hair of the Anglo-masters is good. Now, a bit of serendipity occurred last week when the Supreme Court of Belize ruled that the police department's ban on dreadlocks was unconstitutional. 7 female officers who had been disciplined for wearing their hair in locks made a constitutional challenge against this policy and won. Commissioner of Police Chester Williams defended the disciplining of the officers at that time by saying they knew about this policy in advance and chose to go against it. I can't help but think that this sort of discrimination was exactly what the Equal Opportunities Bill was intended to address. It's a shame that those 7 officers had to go through a complicated and potentially very expensive constitutional challenge just to defend their right to wear their hair a certain way. Okay, stick around. I've got one more thing to talk about, and it's a great story about the rescue of a very special Scottish ship off the coast of Belize.
We want to hear from you. You can find Brent's 2 Cents on Twitter and Facebook at 2 Cents Belize, or email us at podcast@oshaproductions.com. That's OXA Productions with an S.com.
11-year-old Ollie and 8-year-old Harry Ferguson are 2 brothers who live in Scotland. In 2017, they had this idea to launch a toy ship that they christened Adventure into the Atlantic Ocean just to see where the wind and currents would take it. The tiny vessel was equipped with a GPS tracker that would pinpoint its location, and by May of 2019, Adventure had traveled more than 3,700 miles to the Caribbean, where, unfortunately, it vanished somewhere near Barbados. Now, a family in Trinidad heard about the adventure and reached out to the boys to assist. So Ollie and Harry sent a second toy ship, appropriately named Adventure 2, to Trinidad. And after a few minor modifications to help the ship handle the open seas better, the A2 was launched. From Trinidad, the ship made its way to Guyana, where it was located and put back into the sea. Next stop was one of the Bay Islands of Honduras, where the A2 seemed to disappear for a few weeks, until being found by the Honduran Navy. After a few more repairs, Adventure 2 was seaworthy once again and began its trek northwest from Honduras, on a track for Belize. Well, last Wednesday, Ollie and Harry's father posted on Facebook that the A2 was expected to wash up on the shores of Ambergris Caye sometime in the next few days. He was asking anyone in Belize who might find it to contact him and to relaunch the ship when the winds were once again favorable. Well, when I read this post, the first thought I had was, I bet I know exactly who's going to go out and find that ship. And a few hours later, I was proven right. Alito Arceo and his friends didn't just wait for the ship to reach the beach. No, they headed out to sea, miles on the other side of the barrier reef, to perform an amazing search and rescue mission. I had a chance to speak to Alito over the weekend. Alito, thank you very much for taking time to talk to me about this amazing story. Now, when we go back to, I think it was Wednesday, the family put out a notice on Facebook that the Adventure 2 was expected to wash up on the beach in Ambergris Caye sometime in the next few days. So what made you decide to actually head out and search for it?
My friends Andy and Cindy Vigna from the Belize Sailing Center messaged me and she said, you want to go look for a little adventure? I said, yeah, why not? I'm always up for it. He said, what is it? He said, there's a pirate ship, toy pirate ship floating outside. We just need to go pick it up. So I told her, today? Because it was really windy, right? It was a really windy, rough day. He said, yeah, let's go. I said, okay, well, let's go shoot for this afternoon. And we did.
Now, how were you able to find it? Because I understand you had to go miles outside the reef. That's big water.
Yeah, it's big water. And when you go look for a boat in particular, like a regular size panga or 20, 25 feet, you might have to go with a plane to actually locate it before you can actually send a boat to do a rescue or find it. So when they told me, how big is this boat? She said, it's about 2 feet. I said, 2 feet? We have waves like 8 foot. But so we went out. We had Lara Goldman and Al join us. And of course, Cindy and Andy's daughter, Tink, an 8-year-old young lady. And so we went out. And the first thing I told him when to jump on the boat, this is going to be pretty rough. Nobody better complain.
So how long were you out there searching for it?
We left at 3 o'clock and we got to it. We were back on the island about 5 o'clock. So it was pretty fast. Well, 2 hours.
So how were you able to actually find it? Were you just looking, or did you have some kind of tracking device?
Yeah, apparently both had a tracking device, and our friend Al had a small handheld GPS that he used to track point. And Cindy and Andy had got in contact with the kids' parents, and I guess also the kids. So they upped their little beep, where it's the location device, for every 5 minutes. So that's how we did it. So we went out, and of course we were right at the edge of the service area for our cell phones. So I then called my wife Rebecca to say, go on there, check the website to give us the exact coordinates, because we feel like we're close. And then Rebecca will go online, check out where the boat was last, the beep was last, the pin was last located, and then we put the number on the GPS, on our little handheld GPS, and then we go to it, and that's how we found it.
So a high-tech search for a toy boat. That's fantastic.
It was pretty amazing because when we outside first, like I said, I see it. I said, you see it? I said, oh, because I couldn't believe it, right? And we look at this little thing, just floating. It's a But it's a great. We started laughing and high fiving aboard the boat.
But what made you go out into the deep blue to look for it? I mean, you could have just waited for this thing to wash up on the shore, couldn't you?
Yeah, we could have waited. We don't know where it would have eventually washed up. But I think they were afraid that since it was rough, that it might get damaged on the reef while it's coming across, right? So it said, at least give it a shot if we can get it, or else, wait a day or so for it to wash ashore. But it'd be easier to pick it up before it gets, hopefully, not damaged or broken up.
Now, the boys, Ollie and Harry, they put out a really sweet video thanking Belize and in particular the people of Ambergris Caye for rescuing the Adventure 2. Have you had a chance to talk to the boys or their family back in Scotland?
No, I haven't. I guess Cindy and Andy have. We will try to do that. I'll try to talk to them sometime in the next couple of days. But yeah, I did see the video and it's really nice. And one thing that kind of made me join it, because in these particular times it was nice to get like a feel good story. It's really nice.
Absolutely. I think this is just something that everybody in Belize should be so proud of. That one of our own from San Pedro, answered the call. My first reaction when I saw that the family was asking people to look for it is, I bet Alito Arceo is going to go out and find that bloody boat. I've known you and Rebecca for a number of years. You're great people. You run a great business. Seduced by Belize. You definitely deserve a plug. And like I say, I was absolutely no surprise that you were the captain of the ship that performed this rescue. Hey, so what's next for the Adventure 2? I understand it might need a little bit of repairs or something before it continues its voyage.
Yeah, he actually had a small... He had a little GPS tracker right by the mast, and apparently I looked at the width, and he had two of the Rainier flags that, of course, were long gone. I must have blown away. And I had a little plastic bottle with a zip tie to it, to the railing, and it had, of course, the little message from the kids. But I guess they're going to do something. It's going to be taken all over the island in the next couple of days, and they want to do something like on the Central Park with the tour operators to ever gather around to take a picture and just do a nice video. And before we take it out to the open ocean and drop it, kind of like same area of the currents where we actually picked it up from.
That's fantastic. So it's become something for the whole island to be proud of. And I think this is actually part of like a Guinness World Book of Records expedition. And so now Belize is going to be part of that story, which is absolutely fantastic. Alito, I know you're a busy man. I want to thank you very much for taking time to talk to me, and thank you for what you did to be part of this story. I think everybody in Belize just needed that little extra boost that we got when we saw what you guys did to help rescue the Adventure 2. So thank you very much.
No problem, Brent. Thank you too. Thank you for everything, for giving me a buzz, and you have a very nice day. And it'd be nice to set the Adventure 2 on its way. And I'm sure there's something in the works coming up. I know they've been planning, so it should be interesting what they're going to do.
You can check the show notes for this episode for links about the Adventure 2. And I'll also include a link to Alito's company, Seduced by Belize. I highly recommend them if you ever need a tour provider in San Pedro. Okay, before I go, I want to give a shout out to a couple of my fellow Belizean podcasters who also released new episodes this past week. The Natasha Stewart podcast has a great interview with the new Miss Universe Belize, Iris Elguero. And Dominique Norales just dropped episode 3 of Wolasaha with a very provocative episode called The Melting Pot of Racism. These are two excellent Belizean podcasts that I hope are part of your regular listening habits. Hey, remember, you can be part of the podcast movement in Belize by sharing Brent's 2 cents with at least one person who otherwise may not know about it. And don't forget to subscribe to all the great Belizean podcasts on your favorite app so you never miss an episode from any of us. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at 2 Cents Belize. Now, if you want to support this podcast financially, you'll find a link to buy me a coffee in the description for this show. A coffee costs as little as $3 US or 6 Belize, but your donations really help to cover the costs associated with making this podcast. Okay, that's going to do it for episode 23 of Brent's 2 Cents. Enjoy your extra 2 hours of freedom daily, but please do it responsibly so we can keep COVID-19 contained. Please continue to wear your masks, wash your hands, stay home as much as possible, and most importantly, be nice to each other.
Brent's 2 Cents is a presentation of OSHA Productions, Belize's affordable professional video production company.